This is I Love Black People Radio on HUR Voices, Sirius XM Channel 141. I Love Black People is more than a radio show. I Love Black People is a call from our ancestors to protect us from racial profiling all across the world. Go to iloveblackpeople.com and become a member today. Membership empowers you to live fearlessly and protect Black people globally from racism and xenophobia. Join us today and become a member of our global network with an online global green book with Black-owned and Black-friendly businesses to protect you and your community. Membership is free, and with you, we will become 10 million strong worldwide. I am because we are.
And welcome again to another episode of I Love Black People. We've been blessed with an amazing, dynamic, wonderful sister, mother, author. This is all around. She's an artist. This is like an artistic space that she's doing, and she's providing something that gives us a real historical context. And I always try to do my best to represent, but I'd be remiss. I'm gonna let her go and do her thing. Sister Amina Luqman Dawson, welcome to I Love Black People. Thank you.
Thank you so much, dear Sinclair. I really appreciate your having me here.
Oh, look, I've been waiting on this. So this is, let's go. Like, this is something in the making. Give the folks a background, because I don't do good enough, give them the context, and then we can talk about this amazing dynamic book that's about to change the world.
I appreciate that. Well, I have my debut novel. It's entitled Freewater, and it's coming out this February 1st, 2022. And of course, as an author, as I am thrilled and excited about it. So Freewater is a middle grade historical novel. So as a listener, you're thinking of, oh, I have a young person out there I might want to share some Black history with. Hopefully you'll think of that. So imagine Freewater is about two enslaved children that escape from enslavement. That's how it opens. And they find themselves deep in a swamp that's nearby. So they run off to the swamp. And in that swamp, they discover a hidden community of runaways like themselves. And they discover that these folks have been living there for years clandestinely and managed to survive. And my protagonist, Homer is his name, he gets there and he realizes that he's in this free place, but he's left his mother behind. And he has to make a crucial decision about returning to the plantation to rescue his mother. And that's where the story goes.
Wow. So let's unpack that. I think that's what folks would say in these interviews. Let's unpack that. So the audience of this novel, because when you say novel, I know people might think this is, it could be like a romance novel. It could be but this novel is literally a novel for young people. And so talk about that. Talk about when you were thinking about what you wanted to present, and in your mind, this became the audience for what you were trying to do. I think there's got to be a story.
Absolutely. Imagine I'm a mom myself and have a young person. My son is 13 years old now. But imagine when I started writing this book, he might have been about 5 or 4. He was quite young. And I'm thinking toward the question that almost any Black parent has is, how am I going to impart a story of enslavement to my child, knowing the pain and things like that are associated with it, knowing the hard history that it is, but knowing that it's so important that our kids know that history in order to understand almost anything we encounter in life today in American society. It's the root of the root, the bud of the bud. And so for me, I'm reading stories to my son night after night. My husband and I are, and I'm reading adventure novels. I'm reading all sorts of thrilling things. And I'm like, how can I tell a story in such a way that he'd be so enthralled and so into the story itself, he wouldn't even realize that he's getting crucial history and understanding. And so my goal has always been, and it's true now, and it will always be true, to change the way we feel when we think and talk about the enslavement of African Americans in this country. And there's a bit about what you know is important, but how you feel about what you know is 100 times more important. And I think if you can implant a feeling in a kid about what enslavement was and who those people were. Who were these people? Have them connect to those people. That's a feeling that'll last a lifetime. And so as a listener, as someone who's listening to this, I think that, yes, I hope that they would look at Freewater, my book, and say, oh, this is a tool. This is another way that we can entertain our kid, but at the same time walk away with a feeling of extraordinary hope and excitement that they know something of their history.
Wow. Look, I'm gonna try to, seem like I got a little literary knowledge. I do remember what Maya Angelou said is, but people don't remember what you say or do, they remember how you make them feel. And I think what you said about the feeling and the
Mm-hmm.
connecting is so important. My wife and I we were supposed to go to Cuba, but we ended up not being able to go, so we went to Niagara Falls instead, if you can imagine.
All right, all
And
right.
and we went to the museum they had up there, and it was like the Underground Railroad Museum, and they were kind of interested how they got it paid for. They used it as part of money from an Amtrak a redevelopment, so it was literally in an Amtrak station right underground, and they talked about it as freedom seekers. I had never heard the expression freedom seekers, and it literally made me feel a certain way. Like, I think
Mm-hmm.
what you just said, I don't think we talk enough about our feelings. And then again, having children, talking about our young people, and having something they can read that's empowering and make them feel good, as well as an adventure. Let's talk about that part. Let's talk about
Yeah,
some of the adventure. Let's talk about
yeah,
some of the, give us a little juice from that. I know you're not gonna give us
absolutely.
all, but give us
So
the juicy juice.
all I can tell you is that I try, and what the idea is to place Homer in a situation that is most unusual, right? It usually, when you talk about a story of being freed from enslavement, one, they're running north. Two, they are escaping a plantation as quickly as possible in the most clandestine way possible. And I decided to turn that on its head. I'm like, well, what if he doesn't run anywhere too far? And what if, quite contrary to what's normally done, he's not trying to run away from a plantation? He's figuring out how to break into one and find a way to extricate him, pull his mother out of that. And he's doing so under extraordinarily, like, very scary circumstances. But to start, so that's a piece of it. That's kind of the big crescendo. But the big adventure, I think, goes into how on earth can you have a society of Black folks living clandestinely in a swamp without being detected, and what does it take? And so the ingenuity to get that place built is just to get there was adventurous. So he has to go through everything from going underground to going up in the sky to he ends up the big access point to get into Freewater, which is the name of the community he finds, is to go onto a sky bridge way up in the sky that's been built by these folks, and walking across the sky bridge to find his way into this community. And so imagine you're taking a kid on quite a ride where they think that they know what's going to happen. They think they're going to be, okay, we're going north, right? But no, we're not going anywhere north. We're going everywhere from through secret doors to get there, to up in the trees to get there, to
So
finally when they decided, yeah.
So should I say Harry Potter? For some reason, it sounds like almost magical. I know this is all like it's based on
Mhm.
real life, but it sounds like I'm not going to ask about no dragons, but I'm sure them plantation
Well,
masters are definitely some devils. So what kind of I mean
well,
what would you contrast?
it definitely has a historical basis, a kernel. But I think it quickly jumps off of that into a world of extraordinary adventure, a little bit of magic, and a little bit of fantasy thrown in, because I think with our kids, sometimes when we write historical things, we feel like we almost tether ourselves to the ground, like, oh, it's got to be serious. It's got to be, we have to teach them some things. We have to make sure they know their history. And because there is a pressure, because it's not out there in mainstream society, there's a pressure for us to give them the story, make sure they know. And unfortunately, sometimes that creates storytelling that sometimes almost uh, puts our feet in concrete. And I'm like, no, our kids are kids like any other kids. They need to know that they can fly. They need to know that they can go, they can do extraordinary things and see extraordinary things. And that's where the feeling about the history comes in, by the way. And so that's where, when they've done a number of things where they didn't even know that they could do those things, they didn't even think it's like, yeah, you're walking across the sky bridge, you're learning to shoot your first bow and arrow into the sky, you're learning to all these things that these kids do in this book. That's where the memory comes in and that's where that sort of emotional connection comes in.
And you being a parent of a young Black boy in this year, and
Yes.
literally this year's been one heck of a year, but all these years have been some kind of years. How doing all of this, and being a mom, raising a young man, how does this all connect with this journey that you're on? Because I know so many of our listeners,
Yeah.
are mothers themselves, or fathers, and they
Well,
they do connect on that.
I come at it very much from a place that I'm looking at my son, and I know what all sorts of things are out there. I mean, there are landmines everywhere in American society. But I also know, and this is the cool thing about being a parent, that on the other side, that I have an ability to create certain things in their world, and that I might have had to learn things in the sort of like strict, like, okay, learn your history here. But no, we have come to a point, at least I do, in my mind, Black folks are now at a point where we've learned certain things and we have control of our story. And I have all control over how he's going to know where he came from and what kind of feeling he's going to get when he thinks about it. So I'm always thinking, I'm like, there's that balance, right? It's a hard thing to balance, but there's always that balance where you're like, well, here are the realities of the world, but here are some powers that you have within that reality, and always trying to instill both things. Like, okay, well, yes, we understand these the everything from George Floyd to Black Lives Matter. Those things are there, and you have to understand that within that, you are both can be victim to, but you can both empower. We can both empower you to fight those systems. And so I'm always trying to balance that. And I think this book is part of that. It's sort of like, no, you have the right and entitlement to extraordinary, big, cool, thrilling stories about your history. So imagine, I always think of it like this. For white folks, they get that privilege it's so omnipresent and so there that they don't even think about it. We don't even think about it as a society. When we think about white history or mainstream history, it's given to us in so many ways. It's the air we breathe. So everything from like the story of princesses and princes, kings and queens, right? Anytime you bring that up, it's such a powerful narrative, and it's usually done in this sort of historical way. Now, there's a kernel of truth to all that. Yes, there were kings and there were queens, and they almost never share the real story of it, right? They never share that these were actually the landlords that were over all sorts of lowly people who had to work and toil for them, and but instead it's cast in this way of being beautiful, prideful, wonderful. And so that's history. I know it's not technically, it's put out in fantasy, Cinderella, Snow White, it's put out in fantasy, but it actually creates a feeling of history, right? And so that feeling of history, it's so powerful that even Black kids are running around saying, I want to be a princess. I want to be this. It's so powerful that every little white girl wants to be that princess. Every little, like not every, but for the most part,
Right.
that is what it is. And so point is that that's a privilege, right? That's a privilege that they've had, that they've been completely untethered to the ground when they tell their history, completely able to manipulate it and put it in any way to make a feeling of it so powerful that we don't even know that it's history that we're learning it. We don't even see it. We just see it as some truth that princes and princesses are wonderful. Kings and queens are beautiful, and something to be aspired to, something to be to be memorialized every time they have a chance to dress up on Halloween. And so for me, I think Black folks can and it's time for us to do the same thing for our history. We need to memorialize it and make it big and put creativity into it and untether ourselves from these factual nuggets. Oh, this, that, because there's nothing. I always say that because we're always afraid, I think, to have someone turn to us and be like, that's not true. You don't, that's not how it happened. No. No one else has to have that shackle around them. We have shackled ourselves. We don't need to. They shackle us every time. And this book, because it allows kids to fly, almost literally, it allows them to see history in the way that our narrative wants it to be, in the way that we might have shared it, fireside tradition, or the oral tradition of it, all the way back to our African societies where we sat down and we shared our myths, our stories, our tales with one another. And instead of saying, well, here's your Black history card, and Rosa Parks did this, and Frederick Douglass did that, and here's how you learn about it. And guess what? Those things are cool, and that's cool facts. But for little kids, it will come and it will go. But if you can implant some bit that is a feeling, a connection, a feeling of amazingness to that history, and that comes through fiction, that comes through storytelling, that comes through imagination. And we have to infuse that in our history. I'm sorry, that's a long answer to this.
No, I think the empowering, using the tools, again, and I come from engineering. I used to think folks who did fiction stuff, I was like, look, just stick to the facts. But what you just said, the power of the heart, we talk about this intellectual thing, but you really talking about a feeling and how that can motivate us, and the passion that can help motivate us and keep us moving. I think is super amazing. I think tying that to it, I'm sorry. Please.
Just one little thing I think that is particularly important when we talk about our slavery story. When we talk about the enslavement of our ancestors, that is important to us because it was a trauma, and I don't know how we don't talk about it enough. That would happen on those hundreds of years of years of trauma, and it's hard to know how to access it, to not belittle that trauma, right? And say, oh, it's fine, don't worry about it, it's over, and also not to live in that trauma to the point where you can't talk about it because all you feel is pain every time you go there. And so the tricky thing then is like, well, then what do we do with it? How do we access it for ourselves to heal, and then for our kids to know and feel empowered? And so we started that. There's resistance narratives that are coming out now where we talk about, oh, these are the ways in which enslaved folks resisted, and we go through that narrative, and it's wonderful. We need that. And part of what I did with Freewater was using that kind of structure to say, okay, we need to move away from channeling victimization and pain as the center of the story, and let's see if we can channel ingenuity, hope, power, and like all those sorts of things, all the things that really took to survive, right? And so I did try to do that with this story, but with enslavement, we really do need to be able to. And this is what happens in Freewater. There's a lot of children you meet when you get to Freewater. You meet kids that have both been born into slavery and escaped and found their way there. And you also meet some kids that have never been enslaved. They were born on Freewater. They are free in their minds. They have no clue. They've never even seen a white person. That's who they live there. And so you have this interesting conversation that happens between this enslaved child and a child that doesn't know.
Wow.
And that's a rare event, right? And what happens is, though, because that enslaved child, the one who had been, sort of they're kids, so they're not sitting around talking about it. They're not like, oh, well, I was enslaved and this is not. No, they're kids, but you see it play out. You see it come forward because they're playing with kids that have no history, no knowledge of it. And so that interplay allows you as a reader, allows the child reader, allows the adult reader to spend time with that person who has been enslaved, to sort of chill with them, just listen, just hang out with them for a while. And that ability to hang out and chill with your enslaved ancestor, that ability to just be in that space and just be there, that's where humanity comes. That's where true connection comes. And that's where the next time someone says, oh, slavery, it happened, it was in the past, whatever. That's where the next time it comes where somebody's trying to say that it's not that important. You think of that child in that story. You think of that moment in that place when you were chilling with them and being like, nah, they were real, and it was not cool. That's what we want our kids to be. That feeling they get by hanging out with it. Because you got to be willing to hang out with those ancestors going through that painful time to be able to have that human connection with them. That's where the humanity comes.
No, that's heavy. How do you? Because you almost take me in a space where it's like being on the forefront, not of a movement. I can be over the top, so I'm not going to say it like that. Mm-hmm. But how do we? Are there other authors? How do we get them to access this opportunity to share with our young people through the school systems? I know you've dealt with the public school systems, mm-hmm. and I'm kind of taking this from more of a macro, because I think if everybody had you as a mama, it'd be different. Since everybody can't have Sister Amina as a mama, now we're dealing with the rest of the situation. So how do you see you're sharing this one book, but also looking at the overall system that provides books and reading materials to our young people? Where do you see the interface? And I know we were just talking about question. Yeah, please.
Wonderful question. Because especially right now, right? We're in this environment where they have sort of the right and to some extent the left being complicit in this, in demonizing so-called critical race theory, right? And that is starting to impact teachers and school systems and school districts and how and what they choose to share with students. And that's to me, as an author, as a mother of a Black child, as a Black person, period, is one of the scariest attacks I've seen in my adult life on African American folks. Because once you can sort of close the door or shut or make even controversial sharing of basic facts, of basic institutional problems, once you make it a problem to even discuss those things, because that's what school is, it's a place for learning and discussion. Once you make it a problem to even think about those things in school environments, then that is, to me, that's the quick road to game over for us as a people, as our humanity within the society. That's it, because that's where the humanity comes in, is that when your understanding of what it is, even if you can't do anything about it as a little white kid, be like, I don't really know what's up. I don't really understand. I wasn't around when all this, when enslavement took place. I wasn't around for Jim Crow. But if you can take away their ability to understand it, to understand what was going on, then you're taking away the ability of that child to see the humanity of the people around them, namely Black folks. So that's a powerful thing going on. And now where my book fits in that, and where Black folks and our literature fit in that, it's going to be a struggle. I think it's going to be it's like the creation of another struggle for us. And that doesn't mean that it's not one we can't find ways to circumvent, surmount, and things like that. Because our work, that's on the other end of that. Black folks are more creative, have been turning out more extraordinary content now than ever before. And so it's coming up against some really cool stuff, everything from the 1619 Project to something like Freewater. It's all coming, and that is all its own tidal wave, right? So it's coming. So I'm both disturbed by the trends that I'm seeing out there and our complacency as we look at what's happening with that movement. It's not even, we're just that movement around this so-called critical race theory. But I'm also hopeful because there is more creativity and energy out there than ever before to tell our stories. And Freewater fits right into that. But on a personal note, where do I see Freewater? Anytime, and this is as I wrote Freewater, I've always seen it as a book that I wanted parent, like Harry Potter, there Black folks there to be with their kids, and or any parent of a Black child to read with their child, because in the schools it's a it is a good space to expose everyone. But I think the healing and discussions that need to be done, they can and hopefully should be done in our houses as well. That history, and I've always hoped that Freewater could be a tool that Black parents and parents of Black kids in general could just use to start discussions that they don't have to necessarily sit in the classroom and have. Just sit in the classroom and have. I want it to be a tool for all of us.
Awesome, awesome. Right. Look, we're going to have to wrap it up with that, but you've been
Thanks.
so amazing, Amina,
Oh,
and definitely anytime you want to
I
come
appreciate
black on, look, we keep talking about this stuff when it comes to the babies and the art, like
Aw,
we need
you're
it.
the
Thank you,
coolest
thank you.
fellow. Thank you
Yeah,
so much for having me, and just always being so super cool with this, and all the folks for listening to this.
no doubt. And give a big hug to Rob. Look, you know what I'm saying?
Will
My
do.
college roommate, my main
Yes.
man, 50 grand. So, look, y'all are doing it, power couple style. So God bless. And as I
Thank
always
you.
leave out, I am because we are, and I definitely am because of your husband. I definitely
Oh,
am. So God bless. And peace and love.
you
Thank you, sis.
can't wait to see you again and have you get in a little trouble with my husband and all. This would be great. He loves you back.
This is I Love Black People Radio on HUR Voices, Sirius XM Channel 141. I Love Black People is more than a radio show. I Love Black People is a call from our ancestors to protect us from racial profiling all across the world. Go to iloveblackpeople.com and become a member today. Membership empowers you to live fearlessly and protect Black people globally from racism and xenophobia. Join us today and become a member of our global network with an online global green book with Black-owned and Black-friendly businesses to protect you and your community. Membership is free, and with you, we will become 10 million strong worldwide. I am because we are. Special thanks to Banneker Communities.